Now I have the privilege to introduce the moderator for today's plenary session, a friend and mentor of mine when I was a PM in the Army. Lieutenant General retired Mike Williamson culminated a distinguished Army career as Principal Military Deputy to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, or ASALT. Currently, General Williamson is the President of Lockheed International and a Senior Vice President for Global Business Development Strategy at Lockheed Martin Corporation. Dr. Williamson, over to you to introduce the plenary panelists.
Bob, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to join again this year. Really excited about this panel. I do need to talk to you about having us follow, one of my acquisition heroes, Mr. Sean Stackley. I learned so much from him during my time in the Pentagon. I'm really thrilled today to have three very impressive leaders and acquisition experts from the Department of Defense. I'll just start with introductions. I know that you have the opportunity to read their bios separately, but I do want to introduce General Robert Berry. He is the Deputy for Acquisitions and Systems Management in the United States Army. Rear Admiral Kurt Rothenhaus, he is the Chief of Naval Research. And Mr. Geoffrey Bryce, he is the Chief of Deterrence and Technology for Strategic Systems Programs. Very excited to have them. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from both the uniformed and the civilian perspectives today. All three of our respected panelists strive to bring advanced capabilities to our warfighters that will advance America's strategic deterrence. I've gone on record in numerous venues, to include this one, that acquisition is not broken. Our warfighters have some of the best equipment and capabilities in the world. Our allies and coalition partners line up and spend their nation's wealth on the capabilities developed and built by our acquisition community and our defense industrial base. I would also add that our adversaries go to great lengths to steal and emulate those same capabilities. But as you have heard, because of the geopolitical environment, the threats, and the pace of technological change, there is a need for more speed and innovation in our acquisition processes. As everyone in the virtual room knows, it's an imperative that we have an effective, efficient acquisition system that can move fast when needed, use taxpayer money responsibly, and allow us to maintain the competitive advantage that we have with our military. The main question for our community is, how do we harness the current momentum to use it to make the right changes to enable all parts of our defense ecosystem to be more successful? We have seen how the process can be modified in urgent situations. Mr. Stackley spoke today about the MRAP. My personal experience with the MRAP acquisition taught me that when speed is absolutely critical to protect our warfighters, we can do it. I'm also a tremendous fan of our acquisition workforce. I take umbrage when I hear that the problem is in the acquisition frozen middle. There are talented, hardworking individuals who have delivered great capabilities to our warfighters. A whole of government approach to addressing restrictive rules, regulations, processes, and budgeting that removes roadblocks and encourages speed will be embraced by the acquisition workforce. So how do we take these lessons from the past and apply them to our current objectives for faster and more efficient acquisition? Today, during our short time together, we will explore three topics: accelerated change and risk, the defense industrial base, and the acquisition workforce. These three leaders, with their experience, will provide some great commentary, not just about what we've done in the past, but what we have the opportunity to do in the future. We're also very eager to hear from this audience. We have reserved time for your questions after our discussion. Even though we're virtual this year, I'm really looking forward to the same deeply thoughtful discussion with our panelists and equally through your questions. You can submit those questions via the Zoom Q&A button anytime during the conversation. So before we dig into the questions that we have prepared, I'm going to invite each of our panelists to give opening remarks. First, I'll go to General Barry, followed by Admiral Rothenhaus, and then followed by Mr. Bryce. General Barry.
Chairman Williamson, sir, thank you for that introduction and looking forward to a fantastic panel to Admiral Rothenhaus and Mr. Bryce, good sirs. Great to be with you all. What I always say is with our Navy partners in particular, 364 days a year, I eagerly look forward to our partnership. And I will early on salute the outstanding victory last December for the Navy team. My first Army-Navy game I had attended since graduation 35 years ago, and safe to say I won't be going back to one in the near term. But again, it's honored to be with you both, gentlemen, and General Williamson, friend and mentor. Thank you for leading this panel today. So, into the assembled team, very much looking forward to this interaction. Very dynamic times across the acquisition workforce, and I think inside the Army in particular, with a lot of very acute challenges we're facing, all towards what you heard from General Williamson, a desire towards increasing speed and agility as we deliver capability. So what I like to say is leaders lead through change, and that's what we're looking for everyone from the top and bottom of the acquisition hierarchy to do. What hasn't changed is a desire to be able to affordably deliver capability to our soldiers in our case, but really to our warfighters. Unchanged. What has changed is everything else in the process, how we're going to do requirements, how we're attempting to do budgeting, how we're even contracting and then sustaining our equipment, all with an eye on reducing investment costs and then being able to apply those investments across multiple systems more affordably and being able to evolve that capability more rapidly than we had in the past. And what I always like to say is it's very easy to talk about, like I just did, and it's immensely challenging to actually execute. So I look forward to talking through some of those challenges we're facing, the specific things that General Williamson mentioned as topics, both speed, our industrial base portion, and our workforce are all critical in our ability to achieve those goals that I just described. So, sir, looking forward to an awesome panel, and I will yield back to my panel mates.
Thank you, General Barry. Admiral Rothenhaus, you represent the, I'll say the S&T community and that early investment that we make in acquisition. Any opening comments?
Yeah, hey, first, yes, sir. And hey, thank you for hosting and to my colleagues from the other service, General, DOD. It's great to be here with you today. And it's an honor to serve alongside with all of you. Also want to thank my NPS. I am an alumni. Thanks to them for putting this terrific event together. I learned so much and from NPS and throughout the rest of my career after graduating. It's been it's helped me along the way. And so I know putting these events on and all the hard work that goes with that, I'm just really excited to be here. I think General, your question as it relates to S&T is fantastic, and that kind of perspective we're bringing to it. I think when I think about our mission at the Office of Naval Research and the wonderful scientists, engineers, and other professionals I have the privilege of working with, we are focused on really one thing, and that's bringing capability to the sailors and Marines we have the privilege of serving, and recognizing that we live in times with potential adversaries that have significant capacity to develop new technologies and then scale them and deliver them. And so that sense of urgency really permeates everything that we do. And it's that reality, that strategic reality of both that a potential set of adversaries with significant capability from an industrial as well as scientific base, as well as capacity to turn that into military capability, but also the pace of technology and how it's changed and how even a few years ago, our scientists and engineers really could have a better sense of the trajectory of technology, that's changing, as our colleagues had highlighted, that really we're in this era of some fundamental shifts, and that forces us as an S&T organization with the eye of supporting sailors and Marines to think through what we do in a different manner. When I think about our mission, I think about it in three key pillars. The first being our Chief of Naval Operations and the Commandant of the Marine Corps set their vision for a force design, and it's our goal to close the gaps in S&T to be able to make that vision of the force a reality. And we do that in an interactive fashion by listening and learning to their vision and goal, listening to the sailors and Marines on the deck plate, but also providing that realistic science and technology assessment of what's practical in those timeframes, what's really deliverable, and set the conditions for success for industry and others to scale. We also do rapid prototyping, which is increasingly important, and doing that prototyping in increasingly more realistic environments. So we're excited about hard work to bring prototypes faster, and the fleet has been welcoming to that. The Marine Corps, the force has been welcoming to that modality of business of bringing prototypes faster to the fleet and getting feedback. And then lastly, thinking through our partnerships. How do we partner better with industry? How do we leverage the investments made by others external to the DoD to learn fast and use those kind of business processes and approaches that industry has so that we can go faster. But I will also kind of highlight too that, ultimately, I agree that our acquisition workforce has been tremendous. There's a lot of success that we all should be proud of. And I'm proud to have been an acquisition member as well. And I know each and every one of them, wherever programs they're at or whatever service they're at, they're focused on supporting the warfighter. So thanks, and look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Admiral. Mr. Bryce, I think you have, quite frankly, one of the coolest titles that I've seen in a long time, Chief Deterrence Technology Officer. And it really talks to kind of the environment that we're in. So very interested in your opening thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me on this panel. I'm looking forward to the discussion that we can have as a group. SSP is a direct reporting program manager for the Trident II D5 strategic weapon system. We've been fielding the submarine launch ballistic missile system for, since our inception in 1955. We're also now responsible for programs like Conventional Prompt Strike in conjunction with the Army's long-range hypersonic weapon system. And we're being asked to field the nuclear sea-launched cruise missile. So we've got a pretty broad portfolio, but our business is deterrence. We're executing a couple of different acquisition approaches through those major programs. So I'll try and share some of the experiences that we've had there. My specific role is to look at our technology investments and how that benefits deterrence, looking at different types of technologies that can benefit the warfighter, make our systems more effective, and make our adversaries think twice before considering a strategic attack against the United States. So I'm looking forward to how this conversation can go today. I think the topics that we're going to discuss are relevant and timely with the evolving situations in the world. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Bryce. Admiral, I'd like to turn to you first. Everyone in the acquisition community is working towards the same goal: get capability into the hands of our warfighters as fast as possible without making those warfighters vulnerable. You brought up three really important points, right? You started with the vision of the CNO and the commandant. You talked about getting prototypes out to the field faster. And then you mentioned partnerships and leveraging those areas to bring technology sooner. So I think my first question is, how should senior leaders think about risk, and how can they underwrite the workforce so that they can go fast and deliver solutions? I'd like to start with you, Admiral.
Hey, thanks, General. I appreciate it. sir. And, I think some of the comments you made earlier on in your introductory remarks really focused that, our acquisition workforce, they have been innovative. They have been leaning in to the challenges and finding ways to get capability and kit out faster to the warfighter. And I think that's a success we should celebrate and focus on at times, because there's learning going on there. When I think about my time as a PEO and a program manager, I think, to a person, everyone I had the pleasure of serving alongside had this notion and vision that they were serving a higher purpose, that it mattered, and they wanted to get kit out to the capability. And that included our industry partners as well. They were motivated by the mission. And so I think, as a Navy Marine Corps team, we've been on this journey across a wide range of capabilities to accelerate the delivery, and then also find innovative contracting mechanisms and bring in more partners, bring in more players on the field that can bring game for us and bring their expertise. Small business, innovative new companies, commercial companies that may have not in the past had partnered with the DoD are on the field. And so I think there's some successes there. I think as I think about the future, I recognize that our potential adversaries really do have some significant capability to find those disruptive technologies and then scale them. And so it injects us with even more of a sense of urgency to say, okay, how do we maintain that technological edge in key areas? And so, I reflect on that strategic reality. We want to play to the strengths we have as a nation, which includes our capacity to team with our partners and allies, includes the capacity to learn from academia and our scientific base. It includes, again, opening and expanding that partnership with the commercial sector. My working with our fleet commanders and other stakeholders, there is a hunger to take prototypes out and practice with them and understand them faster, and really kind of create that those are familiar with the software systems, that DevOps loop, where you're learning quickly, you're turning and pivoting what you learn, and then you're injecting it back into the new system. And it's been some truly impressive progress across the board, especially in our software intensive systems, where that partnership between S&T, it's really actually hard to tell where S&T stops and traditional acquisition picks up, because it's such a more integrated team than it's ever been. And then having that direct input from the warfighter is really central. Them at the table, but also learning while they're potentially in contact, or of course in an exercise, constantly collecting the data, seeing what we're seeing, and seeing what our potential adversaries are doing so we can pivot on it. So my sense is some great progress we should be proud of, but the sense of urgency is there, that we got to go faster, do more, and learn quicker. But appreciate the question and learning from my colleagues on the panel.
No, thank you very much, Admiral. Mr. Bryce, given the deterrence aspect of your role, the same question about risk, but I would like to twist it just a little, and that's in terms of missed opportunities, strategic surprise, technology overmatch. Any thoughts on the risk aspect of that?
Yeah, so we are in the custody of nuclear weapons, and that's made us, I'll say, very risk averse. We have to absolutely understand the changes to our weapon system before we can put them out in the field. We have a phrase that we talk about around here about no change, KNOW change. That means we have to understand every aspect of the change or capability that we're trying to put out there before we're willing to put it out in the use of nuclear weapons. But that mindset needs to change, right? We need to be able to move a little bit faster. We need to be able to adapt quickly to the changing geopolitical environment. So we are taking some steps, internally about how we can go better address that. what our mentality means that the risk cannot be in the outcome, right? We need to understand what the outcome is going to be, but the risk can be taken in how we achieve that outcome. So what processes or technologies that we can use in the development of that. And then when we absolutely understand it, we can get after it and by fielding that capability.
No, thank you. And I like the comment about risk not being in the outcome, but rather upfront in the processes. Hey, General Barry, I do have some familiarity with your role and the hundreds of programs that you have to keep your eye on. And so really interested in your thoughts in terms of, as you apply speed, how are you taking a look at the risk associated with, program execution and cost growth and being able to deliver to your customers?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's certainly in the forefront of our minds as we approach all of our programmatic decisions, but certainly I think the way we framed it and how the guiding principle we're using as we go through a transformation and how we're acquiring and delivering capability is really a focus on the risk to the warfighter not having the capability. And I think in the past, although that was important, I'm not sure that was paramount always. So specifically, if the warfighter doesn't have a capability that we could potentially deliver to them, looking at it through that lens. And when we do that, that sometimes changes our ability to accept some risk, whether in performance or cost, or in most cases, schedule. So I'll unpack that a little bit. So we've made a bias towards action where we will now potentially deliver a capability earlier in the life cycle and being able to frame both through a material release process, and we still have the same importance on safety and ensuring that the system can be operated by soldiers, but where we may have been significantly more deliberate in the lead-in process. Early on, we can deliver prototypes and essentially assess the performance of the prototype in the hands of soldiers in as close to an operationally relevant environment as we can. So the Army is referring to that as transformation in contact. And from a framework perspective, we've shifted the risk to, hey, what's the risk to not delivering this capability as a framework? Now, in the acquisition side, we are still applying disciplined processes and we're still tracking. So although we are early in the process of transformation in contact, as we progress, we're going to have to be willing to accept some degree of failure, perhaps to a higher level than we may have in the past. And what I mean by that is either the performance isn't what we thought it was going to be, or ability to sustain the system may not be as simple as we may have originally anticipated. That's one. The second aspect we're really focused on in the acquisition world is how the capability would potentially scale. I think uniquely in the Army, I mean, all services, but I think in the Army, we have to scale to a significant degree of capability if we want to have the capability across our service. And what we're seeing is a unit-centric focus oftentimes doesn't scale up with either the speed or the cost that we would like. So we're having to shift the way we think about our programmatic side, where with a bias towards action and a bias towards speed, where are we introducing risk inside our acquisition framework and then coming up with ways that we're going to measure that over time. And although we're early in the process, I think one of the areas we're concerned about is how these systems are going to be sustained, that we don't introduce additional unanticipated costs in the sustainment of these systems over time. So that's one aspect of it. And again, I'd yield back to any questions to further unpack that to any degree. Back over to you, sir.
No, thanks, General Barry. The Admiral mentioned kind of the partnership piece, and I wanted to take the responses from you and now move over to the defense industrial base, right? So clearly a critical partner and an important contributor to our national security. And so everyone knows that a strong defense industrial base is essential for any progress that we're going to make. The software acquisition pathway, commercial solutions opening, OTAs for software development, they're all game changers for small businesses and some of the new entrants that we're seeing in defense and defense contracting. So what opportunities do you see for established defense contractors as they adapt, just as General Barry talked about how they're looking at programs and not wanting to introduce new risk? What opportunities do you see for established defense contractors as they adapt to the speed and the flexibility of these new acquisition methods and capabilities? Mr. Bryce, I'd like to start with you, please. Sorry, we're not hearing you, Mr. Bryce.
Sorry, I'm having challenges with my audio video over here. Yeah, so we're doing a couple of interesting things. So one of our tenants has been our longstanding support from our industry base. We have the same partners that we've had basically since the inception of the program. So we do a lot of source contracting and working with the same teams over time. But that allows us to really get down to a deep understanding of how those organizations operate, what their motivations are. We hold a periodic discussion with industry leaders called the Steering Task Group. We've got the vice presidents of those companies coming in to talk to us directly about what their needs are and what our needs are. So we're able to have that open conversation. One of the things I think we need from industry specifically is, honest transparency about what their motivations are and the metrics they use within their companies to evaluate themselves. Because as acquisition professionals, we have certain knobs that we can turn to try and motivate the contractor. And if we understand what's going to be most effective for them, and get after the metrics that they're tracking internally for their companies, that gives us a lot more ability to influence the outcome that we're looking for. There's a lot of new pathways for folks to get into the process. I happen to run the Small Business Innovative Research Program for our organization, so we're looking at creating those new partnerships and finding new teammates to bring onto into our acquisitions. So hopefully that addresses some of the things that you wanted, sir.
No, it does, Mr. Bryce. Thank you. And Admiral, I wanted to come back to you, especially as the Chief of Naval Research. So I'd just like to slant the question a little bit in terms of, do you see these potential changes and things that are already in place as vehicles and mechanisms to help mitigate the valley of death that we talk about on both sides? When I sat as a program manager and now even sitting in industry, your thoughts on that?
Sure. No, I appreciate it. A great question, and I'll kind of build off Mr. Bryce's comment there too, on the SBIR STTR, the Small Business Innovation Tech Transfer Program. We view that as well as a really a rising tide for the whole department, with the ability to go ahead and find those promising small companies and bring their innovation, bring their unique perspectives to the fight, and oftentimes they will then be subs to larger companies, and kind of going back to the earlier question, sir, on supporting the broader defense innovation base. I view them as a real source of innovation and new, not only the tech, but also the processes and the approach to problem solving they bring to it. So I think that's an exciting avenue, and something historically I think that's delivered very well for the whole DoD. I also see the learning from our commercial partners, who software companies and others who have innovative in the approaches in the commercial space. That too is a rising tide, an opportunity to learn across the whole department from their approaches to problem solving, how they accelerate, how they meet the cadence of the commercial market and apply it to our more harsher and challenging environments that we have as a DoD and the Navy Marine Corps team at sea, having forces very disconnected at times, having to fight in very contested battle spaces, but being able to eke out as much benefit as you can. So I think about the middle tier acquisition, the software acquisition pathways. These are real opportunities, and we've seen successes with them, where you can apply those constructs to software intensive systems to really accelerate the delivery capability. from a science and technology perspective, some of the things we've done at O&R is as we build prototypes in the past, we'd build them and then they needed to be rebuilt or recoded to operate in a more production environment. Leveraging new software pathways, we now know the target build environment, that the acquisition is laying that foundation, Syscoms and industry and other partners. We're building our code to run in that. And so that prototype can then become production code and ready to be used as an MVP. And if it proves its worth in partnership with other accreditors, then we can flip that switch and make it a warfighting capability. And so I think that's the new modality we'll embrace more and more, is that true opportunity to build software systems and not remake them, but go from inspiration. They're coded in a framework that supports acceleration, and then they're pushed out to sea. And so a lot of exciting progress there across the board, especially in the area of software-intensive systems.
No, thanks for that. And General Berry, I'm going to I want to combine something that both Mr. Bryce and the Admiral talked about in terms of not only using those tools to be able to speed up capability for delivery, but also how do you communicate with the contractors, with the defense industrial base. And so you said something earlier about leadership. And so from a leadership perspective, what do you need from industry to bring to contract discussions, to negotiations, to modularity, those types of things? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's a great framework, and I appreciate how it dovetails from my panel mates' conversations. I think, first of all, nothing's going to happen, particularly at scale, but nothing's going to happen in terms of delivery capability without our partners in the defense industrial base. So I always lead with that, because sometimes you'll hear things like, well, we're going to do this in the government, or we're going to do something else in the government, which is very important. And I think particularly in S&T, where there's some unique things happening. But when we transition to scaling up a capability and delivering it, it's going to require not just primes, but the full depth of the industrial base. So I start there, and we all have to fully appreciate that we must continue to find ways to team and approach and appreciate what industry provides for us, and it is perishable. And I think we've seen that in the past. So I start there. But to your specific question on what industry can bring to that conversation, is clarity in purpose and objectives at the leadership level is my mix. I think when we understand that, it's come up in bits and pieces, but understanding the motivations of our partners in industry and respecting that and appreciating it, and then finding ways to find mutually beneficial approaches to the capability is what is going to deliver capability at scale and at the speed that we need. So to do that is responsibility on both sides. And I think from the government perspective, it's clearly describing what it is that we have as objectives. And if it's an architectural framework we want, how we're communicating that, and then how we're consistently applying that, not just in our communication, but then the next level down into our contracts. And I think we have significant work to do there still. How we contract for things in this new environment, whether it's DevSecOps, whether it's how we're defining open system approaches through model-based system engineering. How are we going the next level to codifying that and writing it down in a contract, and then providing that to industry in a way that industry appreciates, and that industry has a viable business model to deliver profits back to their corporate structure that is mutually beneficial. So easy to talk about, but I think having that clarity in the conversations, and that might not happen at a project management level a discussion. Ideally it would, but if it needs leadership engagement, I think that's one of our things we do here in the Pentagon, is we try and make sure we're bolstering and fully supporting our program executive officers and our PMs in their engagements with corporate industry to make sure that we're making those connections the best we can. I think we still have work to go. As I hope I've described, there's always going to be work to go. I think clarity and purpose and intent on both sides, and then having those mechanisms by which we can talk, as areas that I continue to find are beneficial and that we have work to do. Over.
So, General Barry, you said a couple of things that really resonate with me, and especially with my industry hat. Clarity, consistency from the leadership down, I think is going to be critical as we implement some of these changes and these opportunities. I want to turn it over to Professor Mortlock and the audience questions, but I can't let the three of you go without talking about the acquisition workforce. So I view it as a national asset that's critical for our security. And so for each of you, and Mr. Bryce, I'd like to start with you, kind of at the strategic level. How are you working to keep our acquisition workforce upskilled, adaptive, and throughout all of these changes and highly productive? Mr. Bryce.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I mentioned in my opening comments that we're running three different sort of acquisition models, right? We've got the traditional acquisition for the Trident weapon system. CPS is using a middle tier acquisition approach and rapid prototype with rapid fielding. And then SLCMN is going to be like a competitive procurement on an ACAT scale. We're actually trying to encourage that our workforce migrate across those programs and get exposure to each of the different types of acquisition and experience with that, right? We can't have too much, but we need some of it to bring those skills across to the different programs and challenge our thinking in the way that we're going after the acquisitions there. We've held contracting excellence workshops. So we led a lot of different prime contracts. We are the government systems integrator for the Trident weapon system. So we contract for subsystems. We do the integration ourselves. So each of those contracts are a little bit different. The way we go about acquisition with them is a little bit different, and then we share those lessons across and see what applies. So there's a lot of attempts to keep our workforce skills up by knowledge sharing across the different approaches, whether it be Trident, CPS, middle tier, or ACAT.
Thank you, Admiral Rothenhaus. So you have a pretty eclectic group of thinkers and scientists, and so same question: how are you going to not only continue to motivate them but adapt to this environment?
Sure, thanks. And I think all of my colleagues on the panel probably share the same challenges and opportunities. One, the workforce is motivated by the mission, the service, and above all else. And so to a person, everyone I've met throughout my career, they want to do right by sailors, Marines, and the joint warfighter. And so it's that part's inspiring. I think to your question on the S&T workforce, we have some very unique folks, our Navy laboratories, the NRL, and really the entire naval warfare systems and command warfare centers. We're fortunate to have a great talent pool there of dedicated folks who work with industry, work with other partners to set the conditions for the success that the general had highlighted about letting industry scale and set the conditions for their success, bringing in the science as well as bringing in some of the prototyping, bringing in together different performers, setting those conditions so industry can be successful in the scaling and delivery of a lot of truly important capability. Beyond the thanking them for what they do and celebrating the successes they've had and their sense of mission, I think we all are focusing on continuing to support them in their learning journey to understand new approaches to problem solving. I think they all feel that sense of urgency. They all feel the changing strategic environment, and we want to make sure they have the right tools so they can be successful. Understanding incentives from the perspective of industry to set the conditions for them to be industry to be successful and the American taxpayer to get the best value out of the outcomes we're seeking. The opportunity to understand the technology domain and what opportunities that's providing us, as well as the challenges as well. And so I think that continuous lifelong journey of upskilling and supporting their education and knowledge to make them successful, and also focusing on the trades as well. Our nation, we build highly complex systems from nuclear power, aviation, submarine systems, robotic autonomous systems. All of those also require a skilled technical workforce to build them and repair them, as well as the amazing sailors and Marines we have. And so thinking about that technical trades perspective is truly important as well as part of that whole acquisition workforce piece. But
Yep, that's a
I think
really
part of
great
it's
point.
upskilling. Yes, sir.
It's a really great point, Admiral. Thank you. Hey, General Barry, you and I have been PMs and product managers and PEOs also. So how do you address that question? But I'd also ask for your thoughts on, I'm going to go back to something I said about risk earlier, is that as we grow our workforce, as we give them the opportunity to learn and develop, as both Mr. Bryce and Admiral Rothenhaus have said, how do we also, buy down some of the challenges with risk? Your thoughts?
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, I think as I go around and talk to the workforce and our teammates, I always lead with that the importance of what they do and how, as we proceed forward, we're not going to be successful without them. And I think particularly of late, that's more and more important that we always lead with our acquisition workforce, and they are certainly a national treasure in that regard. So what I say is, the things that I include myself in dinosaur land of the old way of doing things. And the thing that made Barry successful as a major, as an assistant product manager, was navigating the old defense acquisition horse blanket that we're all familiar with, the giant chart that had all the essentially blocks that you had to go through. And the way we measured success was the ability to lead your team through there. And that often required, when you had an obstacle, you would have to find a clever way to navigate around the obstacle. So I always fundamentally say, as I describe what's changed now and what we want to reward differently than perhaps what I was rewarded for, is we want the people that, instead of navigating the team around the obstacle in the process, we want the leader that's going to blow the obstacle in place, so that it's not just they got through it, but everyone else gets through it behind them. So embracing that type of behavior and leadership is a fundamental change, right? It is not someone who leads through a process and can motivate a team through a process, but it's someone who can look at a problem differently, fix things as they happen, and make them better for the whole organization. So I describe it that way, and that's not going to happen by edict, by organizational construct, creating something else. It's going to happen by recognizing that leadership at a low level across our workforce, military, civilian, even in industry, and then rewarding that in a way differently than we had in the past, which I would say I benefited from, which was I'm able to execute the process and I'm process focused. And whether we intended to or not, that led to organizations that were rewarded because they were good at executing a process. So a long-winded answer there, sir, but I think shifting away from process more to focusing on capability being delivered. The whole workforce wants to do that. And what I see my role here in the Pentagon is being a large blower of obstacles, right? Setting up TNT and helping people knock through the obstacles, not just for that one thing, but for the entirety of the organization. Over.
I should have expected the Army guy to talk about blowing things up. Hey, Dr. Mortlock, I've been a really crappy panel lead, and so I'm going to shift to see if there's been any questions from the audience.
Well, I would disagree with your assessment there, but there have been great questions, and there's too many for us to get to. I'll just summarize and maybe ask for your perspectives on one. Obviously, the emphasis on speed is there. Speed to the capability, speed and scale to this capability to the warfighter. And that usually results in leveraging commercial technologies or commercial off-the-shelf products, COTS. Any perspectives on why our enemies, our threat, is so successful at leveraging commercial stuff for capability overmatch, and yet we struggle in acquisition to leverage those same exact technologies and same exact COTS products?
No, it's a really good question. Thank you, Bob. For the panel, I'd really like to start with Mr. Bryce, because you have Deterrence in your job title. And then from an S&T perspective, Admiral, I'd really like to go to you next. Mr. Bryce.
Yeah, That's a challenging question. We've seen the pendulum kind of shift. At one point, 10, 15 years ago, it was go everything COTS, pull everything off the shelf, just put it in your weapon systems. And what we're seeing is, from a cybersecurity perspective, we have to understand our designs a little better than that. We have to understand the provenance of our parts a little better than that. And so it's, looking at those aspects of the things that are available before we put them in our systems, I think it slows us down a little bit, but it is incredibly important because we cannot have the adversary in our systems when we go field them. So there's a little bit of a pendulum swing back towards a modified off the shelf or a custom design for our purposes.
Thank you. Admiral, your thoughts?
Yes, sir. It's a great question. I was thinking about what the general had shared earlier about the challenge of not having a capability factored into this pace of delivery and that risk posture that you started with, General Williamson. So I think, like everything, it's a bit of a balance. I think we've wanted to ensure our forces kit is effective and suitable in the environment. We operate in truly harsh and challenging environments that are different from the commercial sector in many ways. And so I think well-intentioned approaches to try and burn down the risk and deliver a kit that we're confident. But I think it's changing a bit as we do recognize that our potential adversaries are pacing. They're learning and adapting quickly. They're applying technologies. And so we too have to reset our risk posture a bit. Maybe fight with a few more prototypes, make sure it's effective and safe for the sailors and Marines and the joint warfighter, but strike that new balance.
Thanks. General Barry, if you could just add your thoughts, because, you have, again, I know hundreds of programs that range from helicopters to, jackhammers, quite frankly, that you provide to soldiers. And so speed and delivering that capability can be viewed, differently, almost by program. Your thoughts on the question from the audience?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's a great way to think about it too. And I'll pause it. I don't think I can shut my phone off here as it's ringing. But I'll push back a little bit on the question or the premise, right? That adversaries are able to adapt commercial more quickly. I don't believe that's the case. Although there's some anecdotal evidence, perhaps in Ukraine, about ability to modify COTS. But I think COTS is COTS, and I think everyone has access to some level of technology. I think what's unique in the commercial space is different than, say, 20 years ago, is commercial industry has advanced technology in many of these new, whether it's AI, ML, or even just data management. They've advanced faster than perhaps I would argue the government has in the adoption of these technologies. And so now uniquely, we are able to get greater technology than we might have in a formation today, simply by going to a commercial product and buying it. And I don't think that was as prevalent as it had been in the past. So I will take that part of the question. I think the challenge we have, it all comes back to risk acceptance, is we can buy commercial technology, we can field it, and we're doing that. In Transforming Contact, the Army is buying what I would call a modified commercial technology and fielding it. And in many cases, we are not surprised when it's limited, whether in, say, higher temperatures that we may have in a more deliberate development have specifically put in a specification that we wanted to operate in extremes of environment. When we buy the commercial technology and we apply it in an extreme environment, unsurprisingly, it doesn't perform to the level that something that had been more deliberately designed. So it's back to the risk acceptance and understanding of that. And I think so long as we're willing to adopt rapidly and accept that at scale, we're not going to have the same kit, which is a whole separate conversation, then I think we're going to be okay doing it. The other challenge we have, we hadn't come up yet, but we are still challenged in the budgeting process, right? Just the old school, how we get our dollars and our ability to apply that at speed. So we all are familiar with the best we can do today. If we have a new idea that's not in a budget, is 2 years from now, receive that in a budgeted fashion through our process. There are attempts at some what we're calling flexible funding and other ways where even a subset of an appropriation be allowed to be more flexibly applied within either the budget year of the year of execution. But I think that's our other limitation in really being able to rapidly apply a commercial technology or even a modified commercial technology as it exists today. And that does limit our ability to evolve at the pace of an adversary who maybe can more rapidly apply dollars without some of the constraints in our PPDE process. So long-winded answer there, sir, but that's my thoughts.
No, that's great insight. But I do want to go back to Admiral Rothenhaus, because he made a point earlier on using software as an example where, because they understand, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Admiral, but because you understand the development environment, the software standards, that he's able to do, the first set of prototyping on platforms and using software that allows us to go faster. Admiral, if I've misstated that, I just wanted to throw that back into the mix.
Yeah, no, I think we have been successful in accelerating software capability deliverable to a minimum viable product faster because of the established software tool chains that are available from acquisition. And so instead of us building to an environment and then having to rebuild it to map to a protected environment, those software tool chains that exist today at NavWar, one of our syscoms, NavC, and others have allowed us to say, okay, we're building prototypes that we know will run in that environment. And then we could rapidly go through both the accreditation from a cyber perspective, as well as the sufficiency perspective, effectiveness perspective, without having to retool it. And so my sense is that will continue to grow. I'm confident it's a focus area for us. And, affords not just for S&T, but external partners out there who have a great idea to know what the rules of the road is, build software and get it accelerated and get it faster out to the fleet and the force.
Yeah. No, thank you, Admiral. I think the takeaway from the responses for me is that there are real opportunities out there to leverage COTS, commerciality, but there are some cases, as General Barry pointed out, where you may be able to modify, but there are some environmentals, some reasons why it's not always the most effective answer. Dr. Mortlock, I know we're running out of time. Is there another question that I could pose to the panel?
I probably not. That's going to be in the amount of time perspective, but a lot of them have to do with in the final thoughts, maybe sharing your lessons learned from both either the government or the industry's perspective is what would you do differently with the experiences you've all had, if you could make one change with the intent of going faster. And so
okay,
yeah,
thank you. Mr. Bryce, I think ideally we could talk in your closing comments to some of the audience interest in the lessons learned, but any other thoughts, around these topics that you'd like to share with the virtual room?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the comments from my colleagues here on the panel. I'm learning as well as all of the audience members. We've had a lot of successes recently in how we do obsolescence management. We've adopted new technologies. We're using, additive manufacturing to create parts now. There are some things that we've done recently that are pretty exciting. The middle tier acquisition stuff from conventional prompt strike has allowed us to go fast. We've failed a couple of times, but we've also come through that, and we're making some serious successes there. Thank you very much for having me on the panel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bryce. General Barry.
Good, sir. I think if I could go back and talk to young Captain or Major Barry, I think that the consistent thing I go back to is knowing your authorities, knowing where your expertise is, and knowing what your experience is, be confident and move out with knowing those left and right limits. And I think oftentimes it gets lumped into risk aversion sometimes, and I think that oversimplifies it. I think if you need to know your business, and you need to know your authorities and know what you know and what you don't know. And when you do that, go do stuff, right? In the absence of guidance, go move out. A good Navy command through negation. If someone didn't say you can't do it until someone tells you to stop. And I mean that the whole workforce. And when we're all doing that, when we're all leaning forward, it gets to an organization that if they have the option to say yes or no, they say yes, right? Or, yeah, I can do it, but I got to do it like this. And it's an organization that learns and sees itself and embraces when someone says, I don't get why we're doing this, it doesn't make sense. Instead of saying, just do it because that's how we do it, they say, oh, here's how we're going to change it, and here's how we're going to do it. So embrace those things. But it starts with knowing your business, and then it starts with not knowing it and then going and doing it, and not asking for help if you don't need help, but when you need help, ask for it. So that's it, boiled down real quick, lessons learned from young Captain Barry to the team. And honored to be with you all today. Good sir.
Great advice, General Barry. Thank you. Admiral Rothenhaus, your parting thoughts.
Well, there's a lot I would have told Lieutenant Commander Kurt, but I think, and I'm always learning. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be on the panel. It's fantastic, sir. Thanks for arranging. It's been wonderful to be part of this. I think I would have said similar to the general. Hey, articulate. I think I would have worked harder on articulating to the warfighting customer the risk and trade space, and allowed them to help me more knock down barriers and be an advocate for the systems that I had the pleasure to work on in between fleet tours and serving in acquisition. So I think that would have probably been a big lesson. I think that's something we could all probably do a little better. Our warfighting customer is comfortable with risk if they understand it. And I think if we lay it out for them and say, hey, this is the probability this new kit might fail on you, and this is what we think it might do, but the gain you might get from having it outweighs that balance. And so we do need to reset and calibrate that, and be able to support the sailors, Marines, and the joint warfighter faster. So I think articulating that value proposition and risk to the warfighting customer would probably be the thing I'd work on. But again, thanks for allowing me to be on the panel, and look forward to seeing everybody out in the fleet and force.
Thank you for your comments and your observations during the panel. So Dr. Mortlock, just a few comments from myself. So if I were to tell you one of the biggest takeaways I have, having gone from, the DoD acquisition to the private sector, is that I would encourage everyone to over communicate with your teams and your colleagues during this time of rapid change. People shouldn't have to guess on what your position is. And so we talked about clarity and consistency during our discussion. I also have to underscore that changes to the acquisition process that are positive, right? They're good for all of us. And we have to remember that. This is, no one's being punished. This is going back to the effectivity and efficiency discussion that we've had throughout this discussion. I can't tell you how much of an honor and a privilege it's been to be able to be on the panel with our 3 panel members. Their expertise clearly shows through, and I really want to thank the panelists for taking the time. I know you have day jobs, and that you had to spend time preparing and also executing, even with some IT problems. And so I really appreciate everyone's participation. And I also want to thank NPS and Dr. Mortlock for allowing us to join this really important discussion in this seminar. Like the Admiral, I'm also a graduate, and I value the contributions that the school made to my personal and professional development, and the contributions it's making to the acquisition workforce. So with that, Dr. Mortlock, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you all. Great panel.